on Geography Paper 2, and there are a number of areas that I want us to go through. Before that, I want us to have a general talk about our subject, from which we'll go to the various terminologies that are used in the exam and how to respond to them. Then we look at specific areas that give problems to our students, areas like photograph work, statistical methods. Then we'll also have a look at how to prepare for this examination by looking at acronyms and other effective means or ways of preparing for the paper, so that by the time we are sitting for it, we are all ready. And when the results come out later in May, we shall all be celebrating. Thank you. So I will start by talking about this Geography Paper 2. This paper, for a long time, it used to be the booster. Students would be very happy and they would treat it as a booster. It is still a booster, only that a few areas have changed. Of late, this is the paper that has been letting down a number of students. For instance, in the year 2019, the K.C.S.E of 2019, when we were marking this paper at Thogoto TTC, there were only 4 90s in the whole Republic. Compare that to paper 1, in which it was reported there are several 90s. So this means that paper 2 is the paper that we need to watch. When we want to perform well at the national exams, this is the paper that we must pay keen attention to. And it is important to pay this keen attention because nothing much has changed, but just the technicalities, how to approach the questions, how to answer is what brings out the difference. So let us, before we go into the terminologies, let us look at how to prepare for this paper 2. First of all, I want to urge all our students to go through notes. We must read our notes. All these tips that I'm going to give will not be so helpful if you don't have the content. So it is very important that you read and master the content. Then whichever question will come, you'll have something substantial to use in answering those questions. So there's still time. This is February. We still have 1.5 months. It is enough time to read and equip ourselves with the knowledge. Second area that we need to do, the second thing we need to do while preparing for the exam in paper 2 geography, we must pay keen attention. We must pay keen attention to the case studies. There are a number of case studies right from Form 1 to Form 4. In Form 1, we talk about mining. In the mining, we have the mining of Trona on Lake Magadi. We have copper in Uganda. We have diamonds in Tanzania. We have gold in South Africa, diamonds in South Africa. We have petroleum in the Middle East. We must pay keen attention to those areas as we look at the areas where the mining is done, the mining methods, ways of processing the mineral, the economic importance, problems faced in the exploitation of those minerals. Then we move to Form 2. Form 2, we have photograph work. Then after that, we go to forestry. In the forestry, we'll talk about forestry in Kenya and Canada. That is another case study. Important thing about case studies is that you must be very specific. When they ask the areas where the forestry is done, you must name them. So it is important to read. We move to Form 3. Form 3, there are a number of case studies in agriculture. In crops, we have the various crops in Kenya. Then we have those that are grown we have cocoa in Ghana. We have oil palm in Nigeria. We have coffee in Kenya and Brazil. Then we move to dairy farming. We talk about dairy farming in Kenya as compared to the one in Denmark. We talk about beef farming in Kenya and also in Argentina. We move to another case study in Form 4. The topics in Form 4, most of them involve case studies. We have land rehabilitation, where we'll talk about the methods that are used in Kenya. Then we look at land rehabilitation in the Netherlands, fishing in Kenya and Japan. Industry, we have the cottage industries in India. We have the iron and steel industries in Germany. Yes, we have the iron and steel industry in Germany. We move to another area, which is population. And in population, we'll discuss all those factors influencing population. Then later on, we compare the population of Kenya and that of Sweden. We move to settlements. Settlements, we have New York City, Kisumu, we have a number of towns in Kenya. Then we look at New York City and Nairobi. We look at Rotterdam and the port of Mombasa. So all these case studies are very important. When we are preparing for the exam, we cannot say that we are ready until we have gone through all these case studies. That is tip number 2. Tip number 3, let us love the maps. Map work is in paper 1, but in paper 2, we have a number of maps. We must look at these maps right from Form 1. In Form 1, we have the map on mining. This map shows the various minerals that are mined in different areas, both in Kenya and the East African region. Look at that map. Look at the map showing the forested areas in Kenya. Look at the map showing the forested areas in Canada. When we move to Form 3, let us look at the various areas where those crops are grown. When it comes to even cocoa in Ghana, you'll find the map being drawn, then you are asked to identify the towns. So let us look at these maps. That is Form 3. We go to Form 4, there are maps. In land rehabilitation, there's this map that is showing the various irrigation schemes in Kenya. We have the map showing the various sites of energy in Kenya. Those ones, 7 Forks. We have the other map showing Turkwell and the regions where geothermal is being harnessed and the other places where there is potential. Look at that map. In transport, we have the map that is showing the various highways in Africa. We need to look at those. Wildlife and tourism, there are still maps. These maps are showing the game reserves, the national parks, the marine parks. When you look at KCSEs, It is very rare to find a KCSE paper that does not have a map. Sometimes even the maps are repeated. Look at the KCSE of 2014. Look at the KCSE of 2015. You'll find that map, the map on wildlife, those sites in East Africa, it was repeated. And even C.R.E in Tanzania was asked in 2014 and the same in 2015. So it is important that we look at these maps. 2019, there was still a map on wildlife. So it is important we look at the maps. Next tip, what we need to do as we prepare for the exam. As we are preparing for the exam, we'll also need to pay attention to question number 6. Our paper, question 6, is compulsory. Traditionally, this question is set on either statistical methods or photograph work, apart from 2016, where it was different. So it is very important that we prepare adequately to tackle questions on statistical methods and photograph work. When we pass question 6, we increase our chances of getting very good grades in that paper, geography paper 2. So let's pay attention to question number 6. Next, let us familiarize with the fieldwork procedure. Let us familiarize with the fieldwork procedure. You'll find questions on fieldwork coming from Form 1 to Form 4. There will be a major question, then towards the end, you are given some fieldwork questions. So it is important to familiarize with the fieldwork procedure so that we are not caught off guard. Again, the questions on fieldwork, most of them are straightforward. So it is important that we do not miss out. Questions on fieldwork, we are supposed to score those marks, all of them. So look at fieldwork, the procedure, right from identifying the area, the topic of study, area of study, preparation, and in the preparation, you talk about asking for permission. Then we also talk about group work, assembling the equipment, need for a pre-visit, need for a route map, need for a work schedule, all those. As we talk about fieldwork, let us also look at the various methods of conducting the fieldwork, be it collection of data, be it recording of data, be it presentation of the data. Let us all go through that area carefully, because these are marks that we are supposed to get without missing even a single point. Next, when the paper comes, it is very important to time ourselves properly. Timing is very important. And 2, proper choice of questions. As students, you are required to pick the questions that you are very well prepared for. And as you pick the questions, remember in section B, question 6 is compulsory. Then the other 4 options, you have question 7, question 8, question 9, and question 10, of which you are supposed to select 2 according to how well prepared you are. It is very important that you select you do a proper selection of questions. How do you choose your questions? Read through all the questions, all sections, then decide on the one to pick. I'm saying this because sometimes students look at the top part, just the first few questions, then they make a decision based on that without looking at the other sections of that question. That is a big mistake. Go through all the questions. If it is question 7A, Roman 1, Roman 2, B, C, D, read all those. Go to question 8, question 9, question 10. Then gauge yourself as you select these questions. It is very important. And don't leave out questions based on what is in just the first few questions of that section. I'm saying this from the last paper we marked. It was evident that students chose question 10 just based on what had been asked in the 10A. That is what made them choose that question and leave out another question that was on wildlife and tourism. Then you'll find the performance in question 10 was very bad, while those in question 8, the performance was a bit better. So students, it is very important that you make proper choice of questions. And about timing, it is also very important to time yourself well. You'll find that geography involves a lot of skills. We are drawing, like in question 6, if it is a photograph, you are asked to draw a rectangle representing that photograph. If it is a question on statistics, you are drawing the various statistical methods and so on. So it is important to time yourself properly so that you don't miss out. You don't spend so much time on one question, then the other questions you rush through. Time yourself well. This paper is the longest, 2 hours and 45 minutes. But if you don't time yourself well, you'll find that these 2 hours and 45 minutes are not enough. So do proper choice of questions, and as you choose the questions well, also time yourself. I want us to go through the various terminologies. Let's look at the terminologies that are used in Geography Paper 2 and how to respond to them. The terminologies that are used in our paper. And before that, remember, this paper has 2 sections, section A and section B. All questions in section A, you are supposed to answer them. Section B, you answer question 6 and any other 2. Very important to follow that. So, the terminologies we are going to look at are terminologies that are used in both section A and section B of our paper, Geography Paper 2. The first terminology I want us to discuss today is name. Terminology, name. So when you are asked to name, you'll find this terminology is mostly used when there is a map. When there is a map, you are asked to name the mineral mined, name the area marked, name the marine park marked K. So name, it requires that you give a specific name, a specific identity. Give a specific identity. This could be of a feature, or you are identifying an area by its name. That is name. That is the first terminology. Another terminology is give. Give. Give 3 methods of mining. Give 3 methods of 3 ways of conserving energy. So give. This one requires a short answer. Just a short answer. Sometimes give and a name that are used interchangeably. Give and name, sometimes they can be used interchangeably, can be used in place of the other. Just a short answer. Even one word answer is acceptable, for as long as maybe you are asked, name the mineral mined in the area marked K. So you just name it, diamond. That is it. Another terminology is identify. Identify. Identify, there are times when it is used also in place of give or name. It can be on a map, or you can just be asked to identify 3 methods of fishing. Identify. So identify can also be used in place of name and give. This one also requires a short, precise answer. Short, precise answer. A short, precise answer. That is identify. Another term that is used is state. State. When you are asked to state, the question is about you coming out clearly using a statement. You require to give a statement. You come out very clearly with a statement. In most cases, when you've been asked to state, one-word answers may not be accepted. So come out with a short but very clear statement. That is state. Another terminology is explain. You are asked to explain. Explaining requires that you bring out very clearly if it is a cause, an effect, or a procedure. It needs to come out very clearly. So you can be asked to explain the effects, explain causes, explain the process. So in the process, it needs to be orderly. That would be explain. Next terminology is describe. Describe. Questions in which you have been asked to describe requires that you give an explanation in a systematic manner. Give an explanation in a systematic manner. So this requires that you go step by step, one procedure after another, one process after another. You'll be describing. And you'll find this question is mostly used when you have been asked about processes. You can be asked to describe the processing or the mining of the mining of Trona on Lake Magadi. You can be asked to describe, the processing of gold. Can be asked to describe the processing of gold. So in this case, what is required of you is to state, to explain how gold is processed from the first step to the last. We are going to look at that later on in my presentation, how to answer these questions that require steps. So there are processes involved in mining, processing. There are processes involved in agriculture, right from the cultivation, preparation of the land, cultivation, farm practices, the harvesting, the processing. All these are areas where you can be asked to describe. Sometimes they use the word explain. It just requires that systematic. There's this other terminology, calculate. And you'll find this terminology appearing mostly in question 6. So in question 6, you can be asked to calculate the percentage increase, calculate the percentage decrease, and so on. So here, you need just to show you are working and the answer. You are working and the answer. So if you have that formula, you substitute the figures in that formula, there will be a mark for that working, then another mark for the answer. Let us get these marks. There's this other terminology, outline. There is outline. Outline sometimes is used in place of explain and just requires that you give your answer systematically. You are giving an explanation of a process or a procedure systematically. That would be outline. In paper 2, there's this terminology, draw. It has not been used for some time, but you can still be asked to draw. Can be asked to draw the map of Kenya, 1 mark. On the map of Kenya, mark and name the following. Maybe they ask you a marine park or a certain forest or an area where a mineral is mined. So it is important that you should also be ready to draw. It can come in paper 2. Then draw is also used in question 6. It's also used in question 6. You can be asked to draw a rectangle. In case of photograph work, you can be asked to draw a rectangle to represent the area covered by the photograph. You can also be asked to draw the various methods of representing data. You can be asked to draw a pie chart, proportional circles, simple bar graph, compound bar graph, and so on. So we have this terminology, draw. You can also be asked, what is? What is? This terminology is used interchangeably with define. What is and define, they are used interchangeably. When you are asked to define a term, or you are asked what is fishing, what is fishing, define the term fishing, it is the same. So when you are asked what is, respond by giving the proper meaning of the term without leaving out key areas. Proper meaning of the term without leaving out key areas. What do I mean by key areas? There are certain words that the examiner is looking for. For instance, when you are asked what is a fishery, the examiner is looking for water body. When you are asked renewable source of energy, what are renewable sources of energy? The examiner is looking for certain keywords, words like used again and again, used without getting exhausted, sources that are inexhaustible, and so on. Here, you also need to be careful. You also need to be careful not to repeat the word. Do not use a word to define itself. What is renewable source of energy? Don't say it is a source of energy that can be renewed. That means you are using the same word to describe itself or to define itself. So use other words. Don't use the same term when defining, when asked to define. Again, I want you to know that all definitions in geography carry 2 marks. All definitions carry 2 marks. So it is very important that we get these 2 marks. If you come up with a definition that is not very clear, you are losing a whole 2 marks. And in this paper, we want to maximize the performance. So when you are maximizing, it means questions on defining, questions on what is. These are questions that you are supposed to score. So read, and as you are reading, look at the definitions. What are the key terms? Don't leave out those key terms as you define the terms that you've been given. That is what is and define. There are times in question 6 when you are asked to draw conclusions or interpret your graph. Draw conclusions or interpret your graph. So in that case, you look at the table, look at the distribution, then draw the conclusions as you answer the question. Those are the key terminologies that are used in geography, paper 2. Those are the main terminologies that are used in our paper 2. And as I said earlier, we just need to be very careful how we answer our questions. And we will get it right when we look at the tip number 1 I gave, which is read and have a lot of knowledge. Once you have read, when you are asked to define, you will be in a position. When you are asked to name, you will be in a position. When you are asked to explain, you will give those explanations. When you are asked to describe, you will talk about the process. When you are asked the importance, you will be able to list. You know, sometimes you are asked to list in place of give. You will be able. So it is important that as we prepare for the exam, we get ready knowing that these terminologies, we are going to meet them. We shall meet all these terminologies. Kindly respond to them in the manner in which I have guided you. You won't get it wrong. Those are the terminologies. Now let's get into the paper itself. Let us get into the paper itself. We have 5 questions in section A. And these 5 questions, you are asked to answer all of them. Do not go wasting time rewriting the question. don't rewrite the question. Just write question 1A, then you give your answer. B, give your answer. Then you go to question 2A, give your answer. Don't rewrite the question. You will be wasting time. Kindly don't rewrite. Again, you have been asked, name the parts. Don't start by saying the part labeled K is this. The part labeled M, no. Just write there the answers. If it is question 1A and it requires that you are giving names, just write 1A. Then you put the names there. We are trying to save time because this paper is quite long and it's quite detailed. So do not rewrite the questions. Just write the question and the answer. That is section A. And remember, section A cuts across the various topics. There are times when even maps are brought in section A. You can find a map in section A and it is very much in order. So let us prepare well for questions in section A, because they test our knowledge. There can be a question in Form 1, can be a question in Form 4, the last topic. There can be a question in Form 3. It is just spread across the syllabus, section A. Then in these questions, there is what we call the question rubric. The question rubric, you are asked, name 2, state 3, give 2. So that is what the question requires. So you are advised, if they have asked to give 2, you are advised to give those 2. Of late, any extra answer is still marked. Sometime back, we would just mark the first 2. If the question was asking for 2, we would mark the first 2, then we draw a line. We don't look at anything below. But of late, the other answers are also marked. But the advice is this: when you have more answers than what the question required, just write them, but start with the strong ones first. Because geography keeps changing. You may write so many answers, then we reach the marking center and it is decided that we shall only mark according to the question. So my advice is, write as many answers as you can, but let the strong ones appear first, so that in case it is decided that the extra answers are not marked, you will still be safe. This is an area, this is just a development. Like I remember in the last paper that we did, that was in 2019, when they were asking countries in Southern Africa where marine fishing takes place. There's a student who didn't know the countries where the marine fishing takes place, but the student knew all the countries in Africa. So the student just went listing all the countries from Algeria all the way to Zimbabwe. He still got the marks because we had relaxed that rule. The chief had decided that we shall mark everything. So in case we were not marking everything, then we just have marked the first 3, which were wrong, then we draw a line, we don't look at anything else. So it is important students follow the instructions in the question. Where you have more answers, write them, but your strong ones, let them appear first so that you can be safe. That is section A and the rubrics in that area. We go to question number 6. Question number 6 traditionally has been either a photograph or a question on statistics. Traditionally, apart from the year 2016, when question number 6 was different. So remember the instructions: answer all questions in section A. In section B, answer question 6. So you must answer that question. Whichever question comes as number 6, it is the question to answer. It is compulsory. So answer that question. If it is a photograph, we are going to look at how to tackle questions on photographs. If it is a statistical methods, we are going to look at how to answer those questions. Remember again, a photograph or a statistical method is on a particular topic. So the first parts of the question are on the photograph work or statistical methods. Then the remaining parts are on the topic. So it is still important that you be well prepared in all areas. I am not here to predict whether it will be a photograph or a statistical method, but I'm here to prepare you so that if a photograph comes, well and good, we'll be able to tackle. If it is a statistical methods, well and good, we'll be able to tackle. Then remember, I've said they are on different topics. So you can have a photograph maybe on agriculture. You can have a photograph on mining. You can have a photograph on fishing. You can have a photograph on industry, land reclamation, and so on. So let us prepare ourselves very well by reading our notes and consulting our teachers. This is the time to really look for teachers, and any area that is not clear, you ask for clarification. That is question number 6, compulsory. Then we go to question number 7, 8, 9, 10. These are the optional questions in which you are supposed to select 2. Let us choose the questions very well according to how we have prepared. Choose questions that you are very sure of getting maximum marks or as close to the maximum as possible. Each question is 25 marks. So choose questions that you are very sure of scoring highly. It will be bad for you to select a question, then you score 10 and below. That is bad. Shows that you didn't choose the questions properly, or you are just not ready for this paper. Our paper 2 is quite long. Our paper 2 requires preparedness, thorough preparation. So it is very important that we do a lot of reading. Okay, now that we know what the paper looks like, how the paper is set, how many questions it has, the structure of the paper, we have now discussed it. Let us go into details of question number 6. Remember, I told you it is important to maximize the performance in question number 6. So let us go into the details. How do we tackle questions on photograph work? How do we tackle questions on statistical methods? 1, I'll start with the statistical methods. Here in statistics, it is very important that you familiarize with the various methods of presenting data, because that is what will be tested. You will be asked using a scale of prepare, let's say a pie chart to represent the above data, or let's say proportional circles, comparative bar graph, compound bar graph, simple line graph, simple bar graph. It is very important that you know how they look like. Just the structure, it is very important, so that when you are asked a comparative bar graph, you don't end up drawing a compound bar graph. When you are asked a comparative line graph, you draw exactly that. So as you revise, our statistical methods, remember they are spread from Form 1 to 4. Look at what you learned in Form 1, come to Form 2, Form 3, Form 4. All those methods, any of them can be tested. In geography, let us prepare. Let us be ready for any. If they ask compound, then we know how the compound bar graph looks like. And I will go into details of these graphs because it is important that you draw the correct thing. Before you draw any graph, there are marks that you need to score. There are marks that are given to you free of charge. Free of charge. Let's take advantage of this. It is important that you have the title to your graph or a pie chart. It is very important to have a title. There's a mark for that. There's a mark for the key. There's a mark for that key. There's a mark for labeling the axis. You label the vertical axis, you label the horizontal axis. And you label it well. If it is production in tons, thousands of tons, you label that vertical axis well. Here it is years. You write there years. Even though you are writing 2000, 2001, 2003, we know that those are years. But when you write there years, then it means you have labeled the axis a tick for you. So kindly let us get these free marks. We get the marks even before we start drawing. Then two, there are various ways of presenting data. Like a student will ask, we've been asked a compound bar graph. We've been asked a comparative bar graph. How do we construct? Do we leave space from the vertical axis? Do we leave a space, then draw the first bar? Or do we draw this bar touching the vertical axis? The answer is simple. You can draw using any of those two methods. If you leave space first, it is okay. If you draw it touching the vertical axis, it is still okay. What is marked is the accuracy. So as a student, when it comes to statistical methods, be very accurate. I will tell you how the marking is done. The correct bar graph or the pie chart is drawn on a transparent paper. Then that transparent paper is just superimposed on your work. So when it is superimposed on your work, when you are very accurate, everything shall fit and you get all the marks. So be accurate. I'm emphasizing accuracy in the statistical methods, the bar graphs, the pie charts, the proportional circles. Be very accurate when you are constructing. Then remember that in the comparative bar graphs, those bars touch each other. You draw the first group of bars touching each other, you leave a space. You go to the next year, you draw the bars touching each other, then the next year. In the comparative bar graph, remember that it is only in the first year. It is only in the first year where the items are drawn in descending order. You start with the highest, second highest, all the way to the least. That is only in the first year. In these subsequent years, year 2, year 3, you draw them in the same order as in the first bar, the first group of bars. If item A appeared the first, item B, item C, then here they shall also follow each other, item A, B, C, regardless of their value. Only in the first year, you draw in descending order. These other years, you draw according to the order in which you drew them in the first group of bars. The same applies to a compound bar graph. In the compound bar graph, in the first year, you also draw in descending order, where the highest item appears at the bottom, second highest will come on top, third highest up to the last in the first year. But in the subsequent years, you draw in the same order as in the first year. It is very important to get it right. Emphasis is on accuracy of those bars. That is where the emphasis is. So you have your title, you have labeled your axis, you have drawn the bars accurately, you have supplied a key. Very important, you get your marks. Don't make this mistake. There's a mistake that students are bound to make. You draw the bar graph in a pencil. Then you come to the key, and in the key, you use ink. You know, the key is supposed to identify what is on the graph. So if you have used pencil on the graph, it is important that the key is also in pencil so that you are identifying. When I look at the graph, I am seeing these vertical lines in a pencil. I go to the key, identify what are those vertical lines showing. What do they show? If you have used stars, what are those stars representing? So it becomes very important that if you used pencil in drawing, let the same pencil be in the key. The two need to be the same. Another thing I want to tell you about statistical methods is as you prepare, be very keen on the trend. Sometimes a mistake is made when setting the question. So the trend is the one that is marked. So it is very important that the trend be right. You have the right trend. If it is an item is increasing, maybe remaining constant, then dropping, it is very important that that trend comes out in case of line graphs. It is very, very important. Let us have that in mind. Then as you prepare again for these statistical methods, look at what is asked. You are asked to construct. After that, the next question, in most cases, is about advantages and disadvantages. So as you read on how to prepare these statistical methods, the various statistical methods, look at the advantages, look at the disadvantages, always. And you are asked 3 or 4, other times 2. So read advantages and disadvantages of the various methods of presenting data. Again, when you are preparing, remember when you have an item called others, the item called others comes last, just comes last. In the bar graphs, in the pie charts, in the proportional circles, whenever you have others, let it be last. So we have talked about the various ways of presenting data. We have looked at the advantages and disadvantages. One of them will be asked just after the construction. Again, this construction, you are advised to do it on the graph paper. Geography, there's always a graph paper. I think page 15 and 16 of the booklet, there's that graph paper. It is easier to do it on that graph paper because you'll be saving time that you could have been using to measure the centimeters and so on. So it is advised to do on the graph paper. Then you can be asked to conclude. What conclusions can you make from your graph? Or you are asked to interpret your graph. In this area, when you are asked that, look at the information that you had been given. Look at which year had the highest, which year had the lowest, which item is the leading, which item is the least, which item is increasing over time, which item is remaining constant, which item is decreasing in value over time. Very important. Then just write the simple statements. The item A was the highest in the period. So you are identifying which item was the highest, which one was the lowest, which year had the highest total, which year had the lowest total, which item is fluctuating over time. It is very important that you get those 4 marks. Most of the time they ask, and the marks are 3 or 4. And that one just requires that you observe the trend. And you can use this trend either in the graphs you've drawn, or just the table that you had been given. And as I talked about the title comes from the question. Just read the question. Using a scale of, construct a comparative bar graph to represent. So that is where the title comes from, that question. A comparative bar graph representing, a compound bar graph representing. You'll get it direct from the question. That 1 mark for the title, don't lose it. Some students ask, how is the title? Must it be in capital? Must it be underlined? You write the title. There's a mark for the title. Whether you write it in capital, whether you write it in small letters, whether you underline, whether you don't underline, there's a mark for the title. So it is just advised that you write the title and underline it in either capital or small letters. It will still be marked. So students, I'm emphasizing, don't come out of a statistical method with a 0. Write the title, label the axis, supply a key, get those 4 marks even before you do anything. Then these other bars or the pie charts, be very accurate when drawing those sectors. You get those 7 or 8 marks easily. Advantages. As you read from Form 1 to Form 4, you realize there are advantages that appear across. Things like easy to draw, easy to compare, easy to read or interpret. Get these advantages that apply across. So whichever question comes, if it is a compound bar graph, you will write those and you score. If it is a comparative bar graph, you will write those and you score. So as you are revising, come up with these points that apply across, and you'll find there are around 4 that apply across. Write them. You will never go wrong. Look at the disadvantages. Write them. You will never go wrong. Calculation, just show the working and the answer. It is advised that you write your answer correct to 2 decimal places. Nowadays, you use calculators, so you'll find a student writing so many, but 2 decimal places is okay. It's very okay. That is about statistics. Now let's look at photograph work. Let's look at photograph work. Again, I'm emphasizing that photographs are on specific topics. You can have a photograph maybe of a greenhouse. You can have a photograph of people mining. You can have a photograph on a crop, a photograph of dairy animals, or a photograph of beef cattle. Then you need to be in a position to identify. And sometimes a question in paper 2 may require knowledge of paper 1. Like you look at a photograph that is showing dairy cattle. Then you are asked, to give 3 indicators that the area receives high rainfall. So that means you will apply the knowledge of paper 1 here in paper 2, but just observing that photograph. What will show this area receives high rainfall? You look at it. Then in photograph work, you must identify the various types of photographs. Go back to Form 2. Look at the various types of photographs. A ground general view photograph will show a wide area and capture many features. And in that photograph, we'll have features becoming progressively smaller from the foreground to the background. So when you are asked, identify the type of photograph, look at that. If it is a close-up, it is just focusing on one main item, and this item blocks the other items in the background. Look at aerial photographs. Look at obliques, aerial oblique, ground oblique. Be in a position to identify the photograph. And as you are preparing for that question, remember, K.C.S.E keeps changing. You can find a question being direct, like identify the type of photograph. Another time, you look at the past paper, I think it was K.C.S.E of 2011. They asked, give 3 evidence that shows that this is a ground general view photograph. So that means as you are reading on types of photographs, you need to know what are the features that make this photograph a ground general view. What are the features that make this photograph a ground closer? So be in a position to answer that question, whether you are identifying the photograph or you are giving reasons why it is a particular type of photograph. That is something that is very important. Be prepared. Then what else is tested in photograph work? You are asked to identify the time when the photograph was taken. Time, you will get it by looking at the shadows. When you have very long shadows, that can be morning, early morning, or late evening. When you have a very short shadow just around the feature, then that is noon time. If you have a shadow that is moderately big, then it can be mid-morning or afternoon. Look at the shadows. Again, in photograph work, you can be asked to identify the season when the photograph was taken. If you are asked the season, look at what is in that picture, that photograph. Can you see people? Yes. How are those people dressed? Look at the ground. Can you see maybe things like mud? Can you see flowing water? And so on. If there's a cloth line, how are the clothes on that line? Are they just straight or have they been blown? Are they being blown by wind? Those are the tips that will help you in identifying the season. Look at the mode of dressing. Are these people in gumboots? Do they have umbrellas? Do they have jackets? Do they have vests? And such. It is very important. It will help you to determine the season. Some other times you are asked what is taking place in the photograph. When you are asked that question to identify what is taking place, then you look at the main activity. Main activity, because a photograph will capture a number of details here and there, but what is the main? So if you find maybe there is a sugarcane and you can identify some human beings cutting down that sugarcane, then you know that this is harvesting. If you can identify maybe human beings cultivating the land or animals transporting a particular product or coffee being picked, then that would be the main activity. So when you are asked to identify what is taking place in the photograph, look at the whole photograph, then identify the main activity taking place. Another area in photograph work, you are asked to draw a rectangle measuring. So those dimensions are very important. The first dimension you are given is the length. Then the second is the width. Do not interchange. So if they say 10 by 8, so 10 will be the length, then 8 will be the width. Don't interchange, because that rectangle will now be different and it will be difficult to fit in the features. So there will be a mark. When you are told draw a rectangle 10 centimeters by 8 centimeters, once you draw that rectangle, there's a mark for that. That is a mark we should not miss. That's a mark we must get. Draw. You have the ruler. Measure the length that you've been given. Measure the width that you've been given. Get that mark. That photograph, you'll be asked to draw that frame. After you've drawn the frame, you are asked to show various features. The most important thing is you fix them in their accurate positions. How do you get the accurate positions? Remember to divide your photograph in those 9 parts. We have the 3 horizontal divisions. We have the foreground, middle ground, and the background. Divide your photograph into those 3 equal parts. Then we have the vertical subdivisions. So we have the left, the center or the middle, and the right. And remember, it is the right of the person drawing. So as you draw, as you are subdividing it like that, remember it is your right, your left. That is what counts. Then you transfer those features accurately. Just go to the photograph. What is in the right background? Bring it to your frame, right background, you draw. You are advised to draw from the background to the foreground as you fix your features. From the background to the foreground, it is easier that way. So just transfer according to those 9 subdivisions. The 9 subdivisions we have: right background, center background, left background, left middle ground, center middle ground, right middle ground, left foreground, center foreground, right foreground. Once you have subdivided like that, it is very easy, because how is it marked? It is still on a transparent paper. So you just look at the features. This feature, is it in the correct position? Yes, tick. This feature, is it placed correctly where it is? Tick, and so on. Kindly don't miss those marks when you are asked to draw. Another tip on this photograph work is do not use symbols. A photograph does not have a key, so we cannot have symbols. If it is a crop, draw a very simple diagram representing that crop. If it is an animal, draw a simple animal representing what is in the photograph, but don't use a symbol. No symbols. Very important. No symbols in a photograph work. Get those marks, because you are asked to draw, and you'll find that photograph carries a large number of marks: 6 marks, 7 marks, sometimes 5, other times even 8. So get those marks very fast. Remember, timing is important. Then the other questions will be on the topic from which the photograph was taken. So it is important that you be prepared. As far as photograph work is concerned. This year, we don't know if it is a photograph or a statistical method, but let us be ready to get all the marks. Let us be very ready. If it is a photograph, well and good. Statistics, well and good. Remember to apply. When you are going for paper 2, go with an open mind. Like you find a question on mining, then you are asked what shows that it was hot or it was sunny. You know, you need to apply what you had learned elsewhere and just look at that photograph, get the answers from there. It is from what can be observed. It is not the theory that you have learned. Remember to observe the photograph. If it is a photograph that comes, observe. You are asked what shows this area receives high rainfall. Like the other time, they brought a photograph on dairy farming. So you look at the breeds in that photograph, look at the ground, is it covered in grass all over? Look at the background of that photograph, what can you see in the background? And so on. So kindly just open your eyes, look at the photograph, then answer using what is observable. That way you will not go wrong. Okay. Let's move to another area. We have tackled question 6 on photographs and the statistical methods. Now let's look at these other options that are remaining. 7, 8, 9, 10. And in most cases of those 4, one will include a case study. One will. You look at the exam, you'll find maybe question 7 is on agriculture. They can ask a question there, maybe on cocoa or oil palm. Another question can be on industry. Then you'll find questions on industry. Then maybe the last part is on Japan or Germany or India and so on. So let us be prepared for this area. I want us to look at crops. There are a number of crops that we learn in agriculture. We have maize, we have coffee, we have tea, we have sugarcane. Then we have horticultural crops. We also have oil palm, we also have cocoa. You'll find when you are preparing for crops, there are key areas. Whichever crop, there are key areas. Because we don't know what can be tested, so we need to be very ready. How do we get ready? One, you look at where are these crops grown. If it is Kenya, where are they grown? Then the next question is, which other countries? In which other countries are these crops grown? This is an area that came out as from last K.C.S.E. because in the syllabus we only learn cocoa in Ghana. Then the question asks, apart from Ghana, name other countries. So that means that we must also be ready to look at other countries where we get these crops. Here is where we say a geographer is versatile. As a geographer, you read textbooks. You also look for information, even if it is on the internet, in the newspapers, and so on. Be versatile. You can get these other countries. So you look at where the crop is grown, other countries where the crop can be grown. Then you look at the requirements for that crop to grow. What are the physical requirements? Then what are the human requirements? After you've looked at those requirements, as you read, you also look at the cultivation of this crop. How is it cultivated? There are those crops that begin in the nursery, then they are transplanted. There are those that are just planted where they will grow. So you look at that. And as you look at the crop itself, the cultivation, you must start with the land preparation. How the land is prepared, how the crop is grown, even if it is being transplanted, well and good, you will start with the crop being planted in the nursery. So look at that cultivation, the processes that are involved. Any crop, we have said the area where it grows, other countries where it can grow, requirements physical and human. Then we are now at the cultivation. How is this crop cultivated? How is it harvested? We look at the harvesting because you'll find there are marks for the harvesting. Sometimes you are asked the oil palm. How is it harvested? Which equipment is used and what is done? If it is sugarcane, which equipment is used and how is it done? Is it cutting? And is it plucking? Is it picking? If in the case of tea, so you look at harvesting. So after it has been harvested, we have the processing. Look at the processing. And here in processing, it is procedural, step by step. What happens at stage 1, stage 2, all the way. After it has been processed, you look at products and byproducts. Very important, products and byproducts. Look at K.C.S.E 2015, there was sugarcane. Then the question was name byproducts. After the byproducts, then you can be asked what are the uses. So you look at products and byproducts. Then you come down to the uses. Even in 2019, there was a question on uses. So it is very important. I'm repeating, areas where it is grown, other countries where it can grow, requirements, physical and human. Then we look at the cultivation, right from preparation. We look at the harvesting. Then after harvesting, we look at the processing. After processing, we look at the products and the byproducts. Then after that, you look at uses. What is the use of the product that has come from this crop? Uses. Then problems facing. Problems facing. So you read the problems. There can be problems that are related to the climate, the physical requirements. Then there can be human problems. You look at those problems. Then you also need to look at the economic importance of this crop. The economic importance of this crop. So as you are discussing crops using that order, as you read, be it maize, be it horticulture, be it cocoa, be it coffee, be it sugarcane, be it tea, as you are reading in that order, when you are making your short notes, come up with the acronyms that can help you to get the key points. Come up with the acronyms. They become very easy. Look at the soils. Look at the soils in sugarcane, soils in tea, soils in oil palm, soils in coffee, and even cocoa. What soils, what type of soils are required? Is there an acronym you can come up with that will cover the soils of all those crops? Look at that. Look at the rainfall. Which amount of rainfall is required? Is it moderate rainfall? Is it high rainfall? And so on. What about the temperatures? Is there a sunny period that is required? Read. It is important because you'll find a crop like wheat. We're talking about wheat in Kenya and wheat in Canada. You'll find the rainfall for wheat will be very different from the rainfall for tea. So if tea requires high rainfall, what about wheat? You'll find this is moderate. Then my advice is this. As you approach the exam, my advice is this: avoid figures. Only write figures when you are very sure with them. Reason being, once you write a figure that is outside the acceptable range, then the whole thing becomes wrong. Just say high rainfall. There's a tick for that. If you say high rainfall of 3,000 millimeters, now if this 3,000 millimeters is wrong, then everything becomes wrong. Advice, don't write figures. Just use high rainfall or moderate rainfall in the case of wheat. Don't go into the figures. If you are very sure with the figures, well and good, write them. But it is advisable not to. Then as you write about the rainfall, is this rainfall required throughout the year or during certain times only? If it is throughout the year, you say throughout the year. High rainfall, tick. Throughout, that is well distributed throughout the year. There'll be another tick for that. So you get 2 marks in one sentence. 2 marks in one sentence. And you'll find crops like tea, coffee, oil palm, cocoa, they require high rainfall that is distributed throughout the year. Those are 2 marks already. We come to the soil. Which soils are required? Are they shallow? Are they deep? What about the drainage of those soils? Are they waterlogged soils? Are they well-drained soils? And which specific name? Here I want to give you a tip. You can write a sentence and get 3 marks. I'll give an example of sugarcane. I'll give an example of sugarcane. You'll get 3 marks by writing a very short sentence. Deep, well-drained, black cotton soils, or deep, well-drained, loam soils. So there's a mark for the deep, the well-drained. Then the type of soil, you have identified this type of soil is a black cotton. You get the mark for that. So you have 3 marks in that one single sentence. Maybe at first you just said high rainfall, well distributed throughout the year. You already have 2 marks. We are talking about tea. High rainfall, which is well distributed throughout the year, 2 marks. Deep, well-drained, volcanic soils. Deep, well-drained, volcanic soils. Those are 3 marks. So when you add these 3 and the 2 you got in the first sentence, you already have 5 marks. Maybe the question required 5 marks or it required 6 marks. So you already have 5 out of 6. There's no way you'll fail geography paper 2. So let us prepare. Let us come with the acronyms that will help us to summarize these requirements, physical and human. Let us come up with the acronyms. Let's look at these crops as you are reading. Look at sugarcane, tea, oil palm, coffee, cocoa. Are there characteristics? Are there the physical requirements? Are there those that are common to the 5 crops? And if they are, what are they? So identify an acronym that will help you to get those 5 marks, maybe out of a possible 6 or 7. Get those marks as you prepare. Then uses. What are they used for? What are they used for? Human requirements, you'll find the human requirements are almost common to all the crops. Identify the most common, then apply them. Problems. In problems, we be specific. We have problems of pests. There are pests that attack these crops. The pest that is attacking maize will not be the same as the pest that is attacking, let's say, coffee. So identify which pests are there. And you know the problem of pests, where there is a tick for the pests. There is a tick for the diseases. And as you talk about the diseases, be specific. The disease that will attack, let's say, sugarcane, may not be the same as the one attacking tea or coffee. So let us learn to be very specific when we're talking about pests and diseases. We be specific about the pests. You'll find the sugarcane has its pests, tea, wheat, and so on. So learn which pests, learn which diseases. Then if there are other problems that are associated with the climatic factors, then talk about them, identify them. If you have been asked human problems, then talk about them. Like the last K.C.S.E, when they were asking about dairy farming, that question number 6, the question was very specific. So read the problems, but classify them. If you are asked human, talk about human. If you are asked physical, talk about physical. And bring out the point clearly. How does it become a problem? Like pests and diseases. You don't just say they are attacked by pests and diseases. You have not explained. You cannot get 2 marks by writing that. So you say maybe this pest kill the crop or kill the animal. And when it does that, the yields go down. The farmer gets losses. Fluctuation of prices. When the prices are going up and down, that is a problem. How does it affect the farmer? The farmer's morale will be low, or the farmer will find it difficult to plan ahead. Bring out the point clearly. When you talk about, let's say, the high costs of production. So when there's a high cost of production, let's say it is in dairy, what happens? The income of the farmer will be less, so there will be lower profits. So these problems, let us actually explain how they affect the farmer. You are asked how it affects the farmer or the yields. Let us bring out that point clearly. Another area in crops is the processing. And in this processing, we talked about this term, describe. So you can be asked to describe the cultivation. You can be asked to describe the processing or explain how it is processed. Here, it is very important to be systematic. From the start to the end, we must be systematic. What comes first must be first. What comes later must follow. What I want to emphasize is, in all these crops, even when you're talking about milk, there's the processing of milk. Those steps follow one another. We can have step 1, step 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 13 or 14. What is important here is let there be a sequence. Let us not start with the process number 1, then we go to process number 5, then we go back to 2. That one will have lost the plot. Let's just look at sugarcane. For example, let us look at sugarcane. Sugarcane has arrived at the factory. Once it is at the factory, what happens? It is weighed. They will weigh. After they have weighed, what will follow? It will be washed. Then after being washed, cut into small pieces. So if we say it is weighed, then cut into small pieces, then we go back to is washed. You can see we are mixing up things and does not go like that. So, but if we say it is weighed, then we skip this part of washing. We go to cut into pieces. We are still on track because it is sequential. Please don't mix up. Because when you mix up, everything becomes wrong because this step precedes the other one. So once you say, we are still using sugarcane, if you say it has been cut into pieces, these pieces are not the ones that are washed. So when you go back to washing, now that one you miss, or you start by it is cut into pieces. The sugarcane is cut into pieces, then weighed, then washed. It is not correct. So let us be very keen when talking about the process. It is not a must that they follow each other in that order, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If it is 1, then 3, then 5, 6, 7, 8, you are still scoring because this procedure is coming after that. What is wrong is when you write 1, 3, 2. Once you go back to 2, then you are lost. So let us just read and get the marks. Then there are students who ask, when you are writing the procedure, the processing, what is the best method of answering this question? Do you write in a point form, or do you write continuous, maybe in paragraphs? The answer is both methods are correct, because everything you write will be marked. So whether you are writing in a paragraph or you are writing in a point form, it will still be marked because you are just looking at their points. So like the sugar cane is weighed, tick. Then you write another point, hyphen. The sugar is there, it is then cut into, it is then washed, tick. It is then cut into pieces, tick. If someone just wrote in a paragraph, once at the factory, the sugarcane is weighed, washed, and cut into pieces, you are still scoring marks. So whichever method you use, the one you are comfortable with, it is okay. It will be marked. In geography paper 2, everything on that paper is marked. Everything is marked. So use the method that you are very comfortable with. If you are good at using points, write it in point form. If you are good at continuous prose, write in those paragraphs. Everything will be read and marked. So it is important to have the procedures well. Even in cultivation, it is the same. Follow, let it be systematic, what comes after the other. You cannot, let's say, plant, then after planting is when you go back to digging, is when you go back to clearing. So you will clear, then plow, then plant. But don't start with the clearing, then planting, then plowing. That one, you'll have mixed up the points. So let us come up with the acronyms that will help us in these procedures. Even these procedures of processing, there are acronyms you can use. Like in sugarcane, there's an acronym when you are reading, when you make your summary, you can get an acronym that will summarize all that process. Cocoa, oil palm, the cultivation, there's an acronym. When you look at your notes very well, you can come up with an acronym that will show you the cultivation, cocoa, oil palm. Processing, you can come up with an acronym too, and it will be very helpful. Even when you talk about dairy, the milk at the factory, look at the procedure of processing that milk. There's a way you can come up with a term that will summarize, and it will help you so that when you get to that paper, they ask the processing, you just write that acronym, then from the acronym, you'll be getting the points. We want to maximize performance in this our paper. Geography paper 2, we want to do well. Okay, so that is about crops. Case studies, let us be specific. When they're talking about Japan, fishing, we must know the areas, we must know those ocean currents, which one is warm, which one is cold, we must know. Then we look at the factors that promote the fishing. Again, you will find when you are revising that there are factors that apply to any of the fishing grounds that you can be asked, any of the fishing grounds in the syllabus. Look at the factors on temperature. Look at the factors on the orientation of the coastline. When it comes to human, look at the culture of the people, and so on. Look at the technology that is involved. So you'll come up with the points that apply to any of the fishing grounds, and you score the marks. The only difference will be the name of the ocean currents involved. Let us be specific. When it comes to, let's say, population, look at Sweden. We should be able to compare Sweden and Kenya. What is in Sweden? What is in Kenya? If it is milk, look at what is in Denmark, what is in Kenya. If it is beef, the same. Horticulture, the same. Forestry in Form 2, the same. So let us be very specific when handling questions on case studies, because they require that we be very specific. Then look at industry. As we talk about industry, what are the factors that promote industry in Germany and so on? The steel and iron industry. Let us look at that area keenly, with very keen interest. We also look at this topic, environmental management and conservation. You'll find there are answers to questions in this area which are very specific, like when you are asked measures that can be taken to control lightning. Those measures will be different from the ones that will be taken to control floods and so on. So let us be very specific as we prepare for geography. Part 2. Again, there's another area that I want us to talk about, points that are always tied. There are areas where a student will write an answer and think that this answer is correct. Leave the exam room very happy. But later on, when the results come, they say, no, that grade is not mine. I want to apply for remarking. Simply because you are writing answers that were not giving you marks. Maybe it is a double tick area where you're supposed to get 2 marks, 2 marks, 2 marks. You write 3 points thinking that you have gotten 6 marks, but you have 0. There's a question like the significance of the mining of Trona on Lake Magadi. Then a student goes ahead, writes about improvement in transport, even talks about the extension of the railway from Konza, talks about the tarmac road to Magadi, and leaves it there. Then that is marked wrong. So what is the correct thing to do? The correct thing is to know that there are points that always go together. They are always tied. When you talk about creates employment opportunities, any job opportunity, any employment opportunity, be it in fishing, be it in forestry, be it in industry, be it in mining. When you talk about creates employment opportunity, it is always linked to raising standards of living. So you say the mining of Trona has created job opportunities, raising the standards of living. That one you get your 2 marks. They are always tied. You are asked importance of wildlife. You say it has created job opportunities to many Kenyans, raising their standards of living. Don't just go writing wildlife has created employment to drivers, to tour guides, and those working in the hotels. Then you leave it there. Without bringing out the point of raising the standards of living, then you miss the mark. Then in geography paper 2, we don't know anything called infrastructure. So that word infrastructure should never appear in your answers. Talk about transport networks. Even just say roads. It has led to improvement of roads. It has led to improvement of transport networks. That way, you will get a mark. But when you talk about infrastructure, that one is wrong. So it has led to improvement of transport networks, making it easy to transport goods and people. So it is for faster or easier movement of passengers and the goods. So anytime you talk about transport, that is what you talk of. Another area is exports. The exports and the country foreign exchange. So this foreign exchange, you should always link it with the used to develop other sectors of the economy. So like we're talking about the importance of trona, you talk about is exported and in Kenya foreign exchange, which is used to develop other sectors of the economy. If it is milk, you talk of the dairy products are exported, earning the country foreign exchange to develop other sectors of the economy. Fishing, the same. Industry, the same. So you talk about exports, foreign exchange, other sectors of the economy. Don't forget that. Don't forget that. Then there's this other point on creation of awareness, measures taken, maybe to conserve wildlife, measures taken to conserve forests, measures taken to conserve the environment. Always talk about creation of awareness about the importance of. If it is wildlife, creation of awareness or public campaigns to create awareness about the importance of conserving wildlife or about the importance of wildlife for the future generations. So whenever you talk about conserving, creation of awareness, they should always be about the importance of. Don't leave out that. Don't just write creation of awareness, then you leave it there. You know, there are students who write has created awareness through the mass media, and then you leave it there. So it must be awareness about the importance of, be it in energy, everything. Always bring out those points. I think basically that is it in geography paper 2. I think those are the main areas that need to be sensitized upon in geography paper 2. We see those are all the areas that you need to be sensitized on in paper 2.
Okay, the facilitator having finished his presentation, I would like to have questions from the different schools which have logged in. Kindly, if you have a question, you can show by raising your hand up, so that I can give you the permission to ask your question. Schools that have questions, kindly raise up your hand so that I can give you permission to ask your question. You can also type your questions and they will be answered. Those who have questions, it's now the question and answer session. You can go ahead and raise up your hand so that you can have permission to ask your question. Let us have a question from Kamutanga Secondary School. Kamutanga, you can go ahead and ask your question.
When labeling parts in photograph, for example, you have been told to draw a rectangle that represents some parts in photographs. Are you supposed to name in the photograph or outside the photograph?
Yes, you can.
Yes. When you are asked to name, you label these parts. You have drawn your photograph. Where do you write? Like there's a power line or a store or such. You write it in the photograph itself. So where you have placed that feature in its accurate position, label it there.
Okay, let us have another question from K.C.S.E Secondary School. K.C.S.E, kindly go ahead and ask your question. K.C.S.E Secondary School.
Maureen Amat's crops. When we are stating the problem facing a certain crops, if you indicate pest and disease, will you get a mark?
You are likely to get a mark if the question was just state. If the question is on state, then you just write pests and disease, attack by pests and diseases. You will get, in fact, 2 marks on that. But if the question is explain, then you will not get any mark. So you look at the question. If it is state, just say attack by pests and diseases. You will get your 2 marks. If it is explain, then you'll have to identify which pest for that crop, which disease for that crop, and how it goes down to the farmer.
Okay, let us have another question from Katelembu Center of Excellence. Katelembu Center of Excellence, go ahead and ask your question. Katelembu Center of Excellence.
My name is Daniel Kakemu. My question is, for instance, I am asked to identify the major car manufacturing areas in Japan, but then instead, I list them without the essential ending into quotation industrial zone. Will I still be awarded marks?
Yes, you will still get your marks. Like, let's say we have those belts. We have the Tokyo, Yokohama. We have the one. If you don't mention the conurbation or the belt, but it is the correct one, you still get your mark. Just like it was in the exam of 2019, you will get your mark.
Okay, let us have a question from Muindi Mbingu Secondary School. Muindi Mbingu boys, kindly go ahead and ask your question.
My name is Austin Juma, and I have one question. My question is, in constructing the compound and the simple bar graphs, are we supposed to follow the magnitude in all, or during construction of the simple bar graph, it doesn't follow that order of magnitude? Thank you.
In the simple bar graph, what is marked is just the total. Like, you'll find if it is rainfall. So January has its rainfall. Have you plotted it correctly? You get the mark. February, March, April. So you just use the data that you've been given, then you construct it. And it doesn't follow. You will not have to do it from the highest to the lowest. You'll just draw according to the value that you've been given in the table.
Okay, let us have a question from Mumbuni Girls. Mumbuni Girls, kindly go ahead and ask your question. Mumbuni Girls.
Okay, I'm Dara from Mumbuni Girls. Ours is not a question but a request.
Okay.
The presenter has said that in agriculture, that he has some acronyms that are used to like assist you to know the processes and yeah. So we were asking if the presenter can give us some acronyms. Thank you.
Okay.
A very good question. I want you to go and read, but for today, because you have asked, I'll give you one that applies to the stock crops. Stock crops, stock, S for sugarcane, T for tea, O for oil palm, C for coffee, and another C for cocoa. So I'm going to give you an acronym that applies to those crops. We have the sugarcane, tea, oil palm, cocoa, and coffee. I'll give you one. When you are asked the physical requirements, I'll give you one that will give you 5 marks. It is a high de ge way. high de ge way. That one will give you 5 marks. High, the high is for high rainfall. And I've told you, don't give the figures, just write high rainfall. De is for deep soils. Deep soils. Ge is for gently sloping land. Ge is for gently sloping land. We has two. We, the first way is a well-drained soils. Well-drained soils. Another way is for well-distributed throughout the year. Well-drained soils, well-distributed throughout the year. So you can say, like for tea, you say high rainfall, which is well-distributed throughout the year, you have 2 marks. Then you can talk of gently sloping land, another mark, those are 3. Then you say deep, well-drained soils, those are already 5. Now that you know the specific soil, you say deep, well-drained, volcanic soil. Those are 6 points. You have already 6 marks if the question was out of 6. If it was out of 5, you even have an excess mark there. So that is my acronym for the physical requirements. I want you to come up with the acronym for the processes in cultivation of cocoa, cultivation of oil palm, processing of sugarcane, and you'll get them.
Okay, let us have a question from Kamudanga Secondary School. Kamudanga Secondary School, you can go ahead and ask your question. Kamudanga, you can go ahead and ask the question.
For example, you are calculating the total population of an area. Are you supposed to use the symbol, for example, the crude death rate? Can you use C.R. or you write it in full? And for example, you are calculating and you have not yet write the formula. Are you penalized?
Very good question. In geography, there are symbols that geographers understand. So when you write CDR, that one is something that geographers understand. It will be marked correct. Even when you're talking about hydroelectric power, in paper 2, you write HEP, it will be marked because we know what HEP stands for, hydroelectric power. That is in paper 2. It will be marked. Then the formula, there's no mark for the formula, but there is a mark for substituting the figures into the formula. Like let's say you are calculating the percentage increase. So once you write there, maybe the figure for the second year minus the figure for the first year over the figure of the first year times 100%. That one you have substituted. So there will be a mark for that, then a mark for the answer.
Okay, let us have another question from K.C.S.E Secondary School. K.C.S.E Secondary, you can go ahead and ask your question. K.C.S.E Secondary, you can go ahead and ask your question. K.C.S.E?
Yes, I'm Charles from K.C.S.E.
Yes.
I'm Charles from K.C.S.E.
Yes.
I have a question. If you are to say availability of infrastructure, and you go ahead and say road network.
K.C.S.E, we are losing you. K.C.S.E, we are losing you. Kindly type your question and we'll answer you. K.C.S.E, kindly type your question and we'll answer you.
Okay, K.C.S.E, maybe you say availability of infrastructure, e.g. road network. Okay.
K.C.S.E?
Okay, so you're saying availability of infrastructure. Then you go ahead and say, e.g. road network. Now, the road network will have saved you. But if you just wrote infrastructure alone, you'll miss the mark. The emphasis is leave this word infrastructure alone. Don't write it. Just go ahead and say availability of roads, availability of railways, availability of transport and communication lines or networks, you'll get the mark. But once you write the word infrastructure alone, then you miss the mark.
Okay, let us have a question from ABC Betty Hills. ABC Betty Hills, kindly go ahead and ask your question. ABC Betty Hills.
I have a question.
Yes.
You have said that while drawing the comparative bar graphs, you have mentioned that we draw the bars from the largest to the smallest, that is the descending order. For example, if the T was the largest in the first year, will I draw for the second year T as the first bar, or will I follow the second year?
I get your question.
We have another question.
Okay, ask.
ABC Betty, you can go ahead and ask your question.
How do mineral ores occur?
Okay. Do you have another question? Okay. The first question is about the construction of comparative bar graphs. I'll talk about comparative bar graphs, then go to compound bar graphs. Comparative bar graph, the first year, you draw them in descending order. You have said T being the highest. So the first bar will be for T. Let's say the next bar is coffee, then the third bar may be horticultural products. So it will be in that descending order for just the first year alone. The second year, you will now not look at the totals. You will not consider the totals. You will draw in the same order as the first group of bars. So if we had tea, coffee, horticulture, then in the second year, we are also going to have tea, coffee, horticulture in that order. Whether tea is the highest or not, you may find in the second year, maybe coffee overtook tea. So we'll still have tea as the first bar, then we'll have the longer bar for the coffee and the third bar for the horticulture. So the emphasis here is descending order applies only to the first group of bars. The subsequent group of bars are drawn in the same order as the first bar. The same case applies to compound bar graphs. In the compound bar graphs, the highest item in the first year will be the one at the bottom. So using your example of tea, so we'll have tea as the first because it is the largest. Then the second largest will be coffee. The third largest or the least will be horticulture. If we have an item called others, it will be the last. So once you have drawn it in that order, then the second year, the first item will still be tea, whether it is the highest or not. It will still be tea, followed by coffee, followed by horticulture, whether the figures have changed or not. So emphasis is on the first bar, descending order. Then these other bars, it is in the same order as the first. The reason being, when you are shading, So you'll have the same shade for T. So we want to see T being shaded the same and at the same position. If it was at the bottom, the T will be at the bottom, followed by coffee on top, then the horticultural products. Good. Second question you have asked about occurrence of minerals. When you talk about occurrence of minerals, we have different ways through which the minerals will occur. We have the different formations first. You may find the minerals are occurring as weathered products. You may find them occurring as alluvial deposits. Those will be the formations. Then the occurrence itself, we have those that will occur maybe as a result of erosion. We have those that occur as a result of volcanicity and the rest. So don't confuse the occurrence and the formations. And in the formations, in the formations, remember we have those seams and beds. We have all those. So don't confuse the two. And I would request you, I will ask you to request your teacher to give you the K.C.S.E paper of 2018. Look at it. Look at question number 7. It will help you a lot.
Okay, let us have a question from Upper Kitanga. Upper Kitanga, and I would like to remind you once again, we are not taking questions with content matter. We will advise you to ask your teachers questions pertaining content.
My question is, when you are writing questions in geography, do you consider the languages or the styles or the spellings, or when you write the wrong spellings and you are intended to write the correct answer, are you penalized?
Very good. I will tell you that in geography, we are very human. You know, that's why it is a humanity. You have already been punished in English paper 1. You have been punished in English paper 2. Why should we punish you in geography? So what I mean here is that in geography, spellings are not marked. You write, for as long as that word is coming out and does not have another meaning, you will get your marks. In K.C.S.E of 2019, there's this question that was asking the rivers in the Mwea-Tebere scheme. The answers are just Tiba, Nyamindi, and Marumbaru. Students would write different according to where they come from. There's a student who will not write Tiba, T-H-I-B-A. We just write T-I-B-A. Even though Tiba is a Kiswahili word with a different meaning, we look at it, this Tiba is very close to Thiba and is marked. Then you find Nyamindi, River Nyamindi. There are those who wrote Nyamidi, those who wrote all sorts. You'll get that mark. Then Marumbaru. You'll find someone writing Marubaru, another one Malumbalu. All those are still marked. In geography, spelling is never marked.
Okay, let us have another question from K.C.S.E. K.C.S.E Secondary School. You can go ahead and ask your question. K.C.S.E Secondary School. K.C.S.E Secondary School, you can go ahead and ask your question. K.C.S.E K.C.S.E Secondary School, you can go ahead and ask your question. Okay, let us have a question from Katoloni Secondary School. Katoloni, you can go ahead and ask your question. Katoloni, we can't get you. Katoloni, we can't get you. Kindly, Katoloni, type your question and you'll be answered. Let us have a question from Katelembu, Center of Excellence. Katelembu, Center of Excellence, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, I'm Hilary from Katelembo Center of Excellence, and my
Yes.
question is on photograph work. When asked to draw a rectangle, is it necessary to show the 9 divisions on the photograph?
The answer is it is not a must, but it is only advisable you draw them in faint lines so that it helps you when fixing those features in their accurate positions. It will be to your own help. It is to your own advantage when you do that. But use very faint lines so that you are looking at the photograph itself and your rectangle. So what is in the left background, you just transfer. What is in the middle background, you transfer. What is in the middle foreground, like that. So it is not a must that you show those 9 parts, but it is to your advantage if you did it with a very faint pencil so that you fix the features accurately. Remember what I told you, the marking is by a transparent paper. So this transparent paper is just superimposed on your work. So if these features are in their correct positions, you get the marks. If they are off, then you miss the marks for the placement of the features.
Okay, there is a question from Changuli Secondary School, and they're asking, in calculations in statistics, do we round off the answer?
You are advised to write your answer correct to 2 decimal places. Don't round off. Just write to 2 decimal places. If you get 69.7333, just write 69.73. Because when you look at the last K.C.S.E, that calculation on the difference in milk, you'll find the answers that were marked were correct to 2 decimal places. The other year, the same. So just write your answers to 2 decimal places without rounding off.
There is another question from Moore Farm Secondary School, and they're asking, is discussing the same as stating and explaining?
Discuss. This question on discuss. Discuss will be close to describing or explaining. It will be very different from state. Discuss is more detailed than state.
Okay, there is another question from Moore Farm, and they are asking, when told to describe, can you write in paragraph or in point form?
When you are asked to describe, just write in paragraphs. But again, everything you write in geography is marked. So use the paragraphs. What we look for are the points. Whether you've written in points form or in paragraph, it does not matter. But for the sake, just use the paragraphs.
Okay, there is another question from Kwandanza Secondary School. They're asking, when questions are asked using terminologies like name, give, outline, do you give your answer in prose form?
Yes, just give in prose form, or just write the answer itself, like you've been asked. Name the mineral marked in the marked K, mined in the area marked KLM. Just write diamond, trona, and that mineral. So just write even one word answers where applicable, they will be marked. If you want to use hyphens, well and good.
Okay, there is another question from Tanguli. They're asking, on map interpretation, when asked about settlement, can you explain your answer using settlement pattern?
Okay, first of all, this is paper 2. Map work is in paper 1, but I will still help you. In map work, when you are asked about settlement, don't talk about patterns. You talk about there is linear settlement along maybe a river or a road, which you will identify to show that you are reading the map. there is linear settlement along, not linear settlement pattern. Then when we have the sparse settlements, you say there are sparse settlements, then you identify the area where these sparse settlements are. When we have those clustered, those people, the settlements are so many in one area, you will identify them and say where they are, but not pattern. Don't talk about pattern. Don't talk about population. Don't talk about people. That is in a settlement.
Okay, there is another question from Mungala Secondary School, and they're asking, are you penalized for using incorrect spelled words in answering your questions?
The answer is no. In geography paper 2, we do not mark spellings.
Okay, there is a question from Kitulu Day and Bodin, and they're saying, if I heard you right, you said that in photography or in photographs, we should not use symbols. Which symbols are these, please?
Very good. When you're talking about symbols, like there is vegetation, there is a, let's say, sugarcane. At the, maybe in the background, there is sugarcane. Then you draw, maybe you write S, 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 S. Then you want and write, you come and write S, sugarcane. No. Those are the symbols you're talking about. Or there are animals in that photograph. Let's say cattle, like there was in the case of the last photograph that had the cattle. There was another photograph that had donkeys carrying tea on their backs. So you do not draw something like maybe a circle. Then you say this circle is representing a donkey, or this S is representing sugarcane. Those are the symbols we are talking about. What I'm emphasizing is draw very simple diagrams. Don't go drawing let's say in case of a donkey, don't go drawing that donkey, even showing the black line on its back. That is time wastage. Draw a simple diagram that is showing this is a donkey. Draw a simple diagram that is showing this is tea or sugarcane or whichever feature. Like you look at the K.C.S.E of 2014, there was a photograph on settlement. Then you are asked to draw the rectangle to represent that photograph. When you look at that photograph, you'll find there was a car, there was a lady somewhere, there was a road, there were lines, telephone lines in the background and such. So you just draw a tree, a straight line, then with another line on top. That one represents the telephone line. Instead of writing T, then you say T is for telephone line. Then you'll find for this road, you just draw one line here, another line. It shows the road. If there is a lady, there was a lady there. I remember she was even in a red skirt in that photograph. You just draw a simple diagram that is showing that, but don't draw a sketch. Then you say you want to supply a key. Photographs don't have keys. So kindly draw simple diagrams that do not take too much time, but avoid symbols.
Okay, there is another question from Water Secondary School, and they're asking, what if you answer all questions instead of choosing?
What happens at the marking center is this. If you are asked to answer question 6 and any other 2, then you choose to answer question 6 and all the 4. You will mark question 6, which is compulsory, then the first 2. Then the rest, a line is drawn in, a red line, and written there, rubric. So the other 2 questions will not be marked. So if you answer all the 4, only the first 2 will be marked, then the other 2 will be crossed and written there, rubric. Kindly don't do that. It is time wastage, then that work is not even looked at.
Okay, there is another question from K.C.S.E Secondary School, and they're asking, if asked of the physical requirements of sugarcane, do you write in statement form or in point form?
Write in point form. Very simple. Just write high rainfall Then you go to deep, well, you can write deep soils, well-drained soils, black cotton soils, or you write in one sentence, deep, well-drained, black cotton soils, stroke loam soils. Then you go to a sunny period for harvesting. Write in point forms, you will still score.
Okay, there is another question from Kamodanga Secondary School, and they're asking, when calculating values of comparative bar graphs, can you use the values obtained after using the scale given on your vertical axis or the original given values before calculation?
A very good question. The thing is, when the exam is being set, you'll find that we want the person in Turkana to draw the same graph as the person in Lamu, Nairobi, Kitui, and so on. So in the exam, national exam, you'll always be given the scale. So once you've been given the scale to use, so you'll be using the figures as you use that scale. You'll use the scale to get the length of those bars. So like if you've been told to use a scale of 1 centimeter to represent 10,000 tons, then the first item has 50,000 tons. So you'll use that scale. When you divide, you get that this first item is 5 centimeters, you draw. Maybe the second item is 30,000 tons. You use that with the scale, you'll find this is 3 centimeters. So the scale, you are using it to get the length according to the figures that you've been given in the table.
Okay, there is another question from Catoloni Secondary School, and they're asking, in questions concerning differentiation, do you use tables or write in prose form?
Very good. First of all, this question of differentiate, it can come in the definition or later on when you are comparing. So if it is in the definition, differentiate between this and that. So you'll just define what the first term is, then you separate it while this other term refers to this. So that is differentiating in terms of definition. Later on, you are asked to give differences between dairy farming in Kenya and dairy farming in Denmark. So in that case, you use the one that you are most comfortable with. You can use the continuous or you use the table. Personally, I prefer you write in continuous, but the table is still correct. The only thing you need to be careful about is when you use the table, make sure that point 1 is about the same thing. Like let's say dairy farming in Kenya. So if you are talking about cooperatives, so you talk about how are cooperatives in Kenya, how are cooperatives in Denmark. When you're talking about the quantity produced, you talk about which quantities are produced in Kenya, which quantities are produced in Denmark. If you're talking about areas, like you say in Kenya, dairy farming is mainly done in the highlands. What about Denmark? Then you say in Denmark, dairy farming is practiced throughout the country. So when you use a table, ensure it is the same parameter that you are comparing. Like if it is cooperatives, you'll say the cooperatives in Kenya are less developed. On the other side of Denmark, you say cooperative movement in Denmark is very well developed. Then again, as you compare, don't say than. Don't say in Denmark, cooperative movement, the cooperative societies are more developed than Kenya. You are losing the mark. You say in Denmark, they are well developed. In Kenya, they are less developed. Like that. So don't just say done and leave it there.
Okay, there is another question from K.C.S.E Secondary School, and they're asking, when drawing a line graph and the first point does not touch the y-axis, can you extrapolate the line?
Okay, if it were in paper 1, maybe you are drawing a cross section and it did not touch the vertical axis, there's a simple way of doing it. You would go to the next, contour line. Then you join and erase this part. Then that would be in paper 1 when you are drawing a cross section. But in paper 2, that first point of the line graph needs to touch the vertical axis. If it has not touched, look at the accuracy of your drawing. You need to be very accurate. But where you are very sure you are accurate, but it still doesn't touch, then just extrapolate. But in paper 1, geography, we don't know extrapolation, we only know exfoliation.
Okay, there is another question from Kamudanga Secondary School. They're asking, when you have not been given the length of a divided rectangle, how can you tackle such a question to obtain the length?
Okay, there are 2 ways of obtaining the length. But first of all, I want to make it very clear that at K.C.S.E level, you will always be given the length, for the simple reason that we want everybody to draw a uniform divided rectangle. But in our own internal exams or for our own practice, when you want to get the length, there are 2 ways. You can use the absolute figure, or you can get the percentages. You get the total, then you get the length. So here you'll just get the total figure, the total amount, or the total turns, whatever, just add up. Once you have added up, then you look at the individual contributions. When you look at those individual contributions, they will enable you to determine how long that divided rectangle will be.
Okay, there is another question from ABC Verticals, and they're asking, how is grading in geography?
Okay. For the grading, I'll be very honest with you that as an examiner, I do not know how the grading is done. But what I know is that each and every year, after marking has been done and all the marks have been captured and recorded to the computers, there will be another team, a different team that looks at that performance, and that is the team that determines the grading system. For us as examiners, ours is to mark the paper. After we've marked, make sure those marks are recorded. Later on, they print, they bring back. When they bring back the paper, we have to check each paper and the mark that has been entered there to ascertain that it is correct. Then we give. So once we have done what we call the cross-checking, we must go through the paper to make sure everything has been marked, all the marks have been entered correctly, and the transfer from the inner pages to the top page is correct. The transfer from the paper to the mark sheet is correct. Once we have done that, we hand over the paper. So there's another different team that deals with that. So they are the ones who decide where the A will start and so on.
Okay, there is another question from Changuli Secondary School, and they're asking, when asked to describe using labeled diagram and you are not sure with your diagram, can you describe using a paragraph?
Very well. This is a question in paper 1. When you are asked to describe using well-labeled diagrams and you don't draw a diagram, then you are wrong, because the question is using well-labeled diagram. So it is the diagram that carries more weight. In that case, you will have lost it. But where you are not so sure, you draw what you know, because in geography, everything is marked. You may not be sure, yet whatever you are drawing is correct. Again, look at the number of diagrams. I am saying that because when you look at the notes, most notes written about formation of the Rift Valley, let's say using tensional forces, you'll have the notes, you'll find that notes have 3 diagrams. You look at K.C.S.E 2015, question number 8. It had the formation of the Rift Valley using tensional forces. It had 4 diagrams. So there are 4 marks for the diagram, 4 marks for the explanation. So let us be careful with our diagrams. They need to be many, and we need to be very sure about them.
Okay, let us have a question from Chambuko. Chambuko, you can go ahead and ask your question.
So my question was a question, for example, you come across a question saying or asking, state 4 examples, state 4 reasons why. For example, state 4 reasons why sugarcane is growing in Kenya, for example, just any state 4 reasons why. Then, and the rewarding marks is 8 marks. So do we just state 4 reasons, or we just give 8 points and explain? Or so what are we going about it?
Very good. So when you find the marks are 6 or are 8, it means that there is marking of the reason and how you explain it. So even when you look at K.C.S.E, the last exam, it was about the car industry. Not car, it was about the steel and iron industry in Germany. So you'll talk about availability of capital. No, that is a factor. So there's a mark for the factor, then an explanation. If it is the car industry, you talk of high population. So that is a tick. So that high population, what does it do? It gives market for the items produced. There's a mark for that explanation. Or this high population provides labor, skilled labor. So such points, you'll find it being marked. Some time back, it used to be double tick, where there are 2 marks at the end of the statement. If the whole statement is correct, you get 2 marks. If it is not correct, you get 0. But of late, there's the splitting. So when you are asked reasons or factors, you'll find a mark for the factor, a mark for the explanation, a mark for the reason, a mark for the explanation, and so on. Or an effect. What does it do? The effects. This happens, a tick, then the effect itself. So just feel free, write your points. But when you see the marks are 6 or 8, you cannot state. You cannot write in point form. That requires an explanation.
Okay, let us have a question from Volta Secondary School. Volta, you can go ahead and ask your question. Volta? Volta Secondary School, you can go ahead and ask your question. Volta?
Okay, my question is, what if you are drawing a rectangle? Do you show the correct measurements when representing the data?
Very good. As I have emphasized, I will still repeat. The marking is about accuracy. And the marking is done using a transparent paper. So you must endeavor to be as accurate as possible. If it is a divided rectangle, you know you are drawing it starting with the highest item on the left. So the highest item will be on the left, followed by the second highest, third to the lowest. So endeavor to be as accurate as possible. Because if you've been told 15 centimeters, so you'll be getting the proportion of that out of the total times 15 centimeters. What you get is what you plot. Make sure you are as accurate as possible.
Okay, let us have a question from Chambuko Secondary School. Chambuko, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, thank you. So I was asking, for example, a question on photograph work, and we have been told to give stages involved in palm oil production, from harvesting, specific harvesting to marketing. And then you go a step forward and you you started from from when it's planting, from where it's planting to marketing. So are you going to get penalized for you starting from planting or growing the crop to marketing?
If the
Yeah,
question
thank you.
is specific, where the question is specific from harvesting, or you'll find like sugarcane, they ask from the time it reaches the factory. So it means everything before that will not be marked. So you are supposed to start from where the question has asked. So if the question is from harvesting, then you talk about how that pod is cut off using a sharp knife. Then you go all the way up to the how it is prepared, packed, ready for marketing. So don't go to the steps before. Be very, just answer according to what you've been asked. If you have been asked once it reaches the factory, so you start at the factory. Like in the case of tea, then you just start at how it is weighed a second time and so on. If it is a sugarcane, the same. Coffee, the same. Don't go back to cultivation because that is outside the scope of the question. Okay, with that, I think I'm told there are no more questions, but if you have, you could ask. Otherwise, I am very happy. I give thanks to God, first of all, and I give thanks to the Machakos sub-county for giving me this opportunity. I believe I have done my best, and it is my wish that all of you take everything that you've been given today very seriously. This is not the end of it. In your school, there are teachers of geography, many of them. Kindly consult in any area where you are not sure, be it paper 1, be it paper 2. Consult widely, and I wish you the very best. It is my prayer that come May this year, we will be celebrating the good performance in our subject. Remember, all these tips will not help you if you don't have the content. I am repeating, these tips will not work if you don't have the content. Go back and read. I wish that you read so that you have the content and you use it. Apply it in answering questions. Be a friend of maps. Any topic that has maps, look at energy. We have those dams in Kenya, those in Africa, and so on. Transport, we have the St. Lawrence Seaway, those canals, and so on. Look at all those. I am very sure we shall do well. I take this early opportunity to wish you the best in the exams, and may God bless you all.